Hey, it's the Midnight Raven, and today I want to do another graveyard journal. And this time, instead of ways of saying goodbye, which was my last video, if you haven't watched that, I will link it. Today, we are going to talk about processing grief. So, we're going to have a quick chat about processing grief, the ways you can process grief, the way to deal with processing grief. Currently, I am sitting in the graveyard once again in my spot by my favourite tree. I have seen a rabbit and a squirrel. I'll put pictures in the Discord. But today I want to delve into the process of grieving for somebody after they have died. So, obviously, grieving is a process from the minute you hear that somebody has died, i.e., using an example, would be my best friend who died in February. I'd known him for 27 long years. I'd known him since I was in high school, and we were in communication every other day throughout our entire lives until he passed in February. Now, the circumstances where he passed were quick and sudden. I had spoken to him 2 days before he passed. It was unexpected, and obviously, I was informed that he had died. And then I was on the way home from work when I found out on the bus, and I literally broke down in tears and cried on the bus. And then from there, I was in shock and trying to process the loss of a friend who was literally virtually the same age as me. Which is scary in itself to think that someone of my age, I am only 39, would die unexpectedly. So, dealing with grief is different for everybody. Nobody grieves the same. Some people grieve really quickly and then they get back to life. Some people never let go of the hurt and they keep it in here. Some people try and work through the grief, and at certain times of the year, like the anniversary of the person's death, their birthday, if you were married, maybe your wedding anniversary pops up, occasions that trigger something. Grieving is personal to everybody, it's individual. Some people can grieve just by hearing a person has died, they bury them, and then they move on. Other people, when a person dies, they bury them and they hold that grief for months or even years. Now, there is no right way or there's no wrong way to grieve. No one can give you the rule book on how to grieve for somebody passing. Because there are many ways that people pass. Obviously, people can die of natural causes just from old age. They can die from diseases like cancer and the such. You could die from a random incident like a car crash or something like that. You can die in your sleep. There are many ways that you can die, and that makes grieving even more harder because the death of a person isn't necessarily planned, it's unexpected. No one plans to die. um, no one plans to shuttle off this mortal coil at a certain time on a certain date and can prepare you for the shock and the horror sometimes of how the person died, depending on how they died. And you're never prepared. It's not something like you can prepare yourself for an exam, you can prepare yourself for a day out. This is a situation where you are thrown into an unexpected situation by means out of your control, which is even more terrifying because you can control everything within your life within reason. You can control where you live, you can control what job you have, you can control who you date, who you marry, who you hang out with. But death is the only thing on this planet that you effectively do have no control of. You are born, and at some point you will die. The date of your death is unknown. You cannot predict the date of your death. Obviously, if you are sick and poorly and you are giving a terminal diagnosis, you could be given 6 to 8 months to a year, but you still don't know your ultimate day of death, which means even if a person knows their friend or their loved one is going to die, they still do not process that grief effectively, even knowing a person's going to die, until they have died, because you cannot understand the loss of a person until they are gone. Now, my personal experience with grief is I don't. I lost my friend in February. I've lost my uncle this year. I lost my neighbor, and my nan is now dying from dementia. She's been given, effectively at the minute, a, I suppose you could call it, terminal diagnosis. She's on the way out, and I don't really grieve. When I found out my best friend had died in February, I threw myself into my work. When my uncle died, I threw myself into my work. You're seeing a pattern. My nan has got a prognosis. I am trying to throw myself into work and mask whatever pain I have from all of those situations. And apparently, I should have dealt with my grief. I should have mourned, and I didn't. Because you know what happens when you mourn and you grieve for somebody? The fact that they have died becomes real. Now, I have stuck to my guns with the death of my friend, and I don't want to believe he's dead. I don't want to believe that the next time I message him, I don't get a reply. I still have his name, still have his number in my phone. I still feel his presence, however you want to call that, in my life, even though he's gone. It's probably in here and in here, but I feel him. I can feel him sometimes as though he's looking on me. It's weird, and I know people are going to think it's strange. But everyone grieves differently, and it's the process of grieving for an individual that helps them. Now, I threw myself into my work, and I have come to a point where I have struggled, and I'm struggling with just life itself right now. Is that mainly due to the deaths that I've had within the year? It is a possible attribute to it, but there are many other factors that are currently affecting my life as well, which we're not going to go into in this video because we are concentrating on the grief part. But everybody grieves differently. Some people throw themselves into work. Some people will book a holiday and try and get out of the area, out of the situation. If you lived with a loved one, some people will move house, move area, get away from that place so that you don't go around the town every day. You'll avoid going to restaurants that you used to go with your loved ones, or you'll change where you used to go on holiday. But then there's the opposite. Some people will keep in the same house because they want to keep the spirit alive, or they'll visit the same place that they used to every year and have a remembrance for their loved one because that was where they holidayed every year. Me personally, after my friend had died, I came to a graveyard every day for like 5-10 minutes to have, like, I want to call a reflection, and just sit here, and I'd cry for like 10 minutes, and then I'd go home and go back to life. And I did that for about 3 months. And then I started coming weekly and having the same sort of thing, just a minute of reflection on missing him. And then a couple of months ago, I stopped coming, not because I didn't love Adam anymore or care for him. It's not that. It became too cold. The weather stopped me coming to the graveyard so much. But is it healthy to come to a graveyard every day? Is it healthy to come to a graveyard every week? How do you process grief of an unexpected death of a loved one? There is no rule book on how to process grief. There's no rule book. There's no day-to-day plan of how you pick yourself up and you carry on. I miss him every day. Obviously, I lost my uncle. I lost my neighbor, and now my nan is slowly dying too. It's a lot to take on, as well as other factors that I have going on in my life right now, which are also affecting me, which we're not going into, as I said. But everybody processes the grief of a loved one differently, whether it's an expected death or an unexpected death. I guess the ultimate goal is to become happy with the fact that they've moved on, and, you know, be not joyous, but be thankful for the time that you had with them. To know that they, while they were on this earth, put a smile on your face, made you happy, and that they were here for a reason, and now they have gone off for some other reason. I'm not religious in any sense, and I do not believe there is a heaven or a hell or anything like that. I don't know where Adam is, or where my uncle is, or where my neighbor is. I just hope they are happy where they are. Um, and that, you know, their time on this earth was for a good reason. Now, processing grief long term, it doesn't have an expiry date. Grief can be 2 months, 2 years, 20 years. There is no expiry date on grieving. You can take as long as you need to grieve. The one thing that people do say is that when grief starts to affect your life, maybe you should seek help, counseling. I'm not pushing the idea of antidepressants. I myself don't take them. I'm totally against drugging myself up to feel better. Counseling, I'm not totally against counseling as long as it's counseling in the right way and it's respectful and everything else by a proper professional, and they understand, you know, the ins and outs of me. I don't want drugs. I'm not into drugging myself up to feel better. I would rather get a serotonin push elsewhere, elsehow, going for a walk, going to the gym, spending day with family. I don't want to be drugged up to the eyeballs. But counseling, having someone to talk to confide in, maybe trying to meet new people that have suffered a loss and are dealing with it. There are ways of dealing with grief without having to seek medication, because I don't like the idea of antidepressants. I have heard so many bad things about them, and I would rather not. I would rather get a serotonin hype from somewhere else, or I would rather find a way of coping with the loss of my friend in other ways. But this is the Graveyard Journals. I am the Midnight Raven. Let me know your thoughts down below on how you personally have processed grief, whether you've lost a loved one, how you dealt with it, what the outcome was, how you feel about it now. You obviously don't have to go into too much detail, but I would love to know the ways of how you grieved. Did you go away on holiday? Did you sit in a graveyard like me? Did you do a video diary of how things were for the foreseeable months afterwards? How do you feel now? Do you feel relieved? Do you feel happy? Do you still feel sad? Grief has no time period, and I think that's something that people don't realize. When somebody dies and they want you to pick up your socks and get back to work and get back to normality, grief doesn't have a time span. It is one of the things that can be controlled by you personally. Aside from other exterior factors, you can grieve in your own time. It's when grief, I guess, affects you in a more outer way, like your work, your life, your family, your friends, your loved ones, or something, a relationship. I've struggled, and now I am going to see a doctor today to help with my depression and my grief and just my struggles. And it takes a lot to say that. But if you want to support the channel with a big thumbs up, comment down below, like I said, how do you deal with grief? How have you dealt with grief? If you want to support the channel in any way, a PayPal or a Super Chat are the best ways to fund the channel. I will see you all very soon for a Graveyard Journal. I love you all. Check out the Discord for pictures of the squirrels and the rabbits I have seen while being in here. I guess Adam really is watching over me, and I'll see you very soon. Bye, guys.